Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of All About America's Team, brought to you by Delahanty Media. And I know it's been a while, so I'm going to spend the next few minutes just updating everybody on where we've been. So I just finished my master's program a few months ago, so the last few months have been extremely busy. So Ray nor I have been able to set time aside to be able to give the show exactly like the time that it needs. But we've been watching every game. We watched obviously the playoff game and how dreadful that was, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And as well as keeping up with training camp information. Him and I text like every day about it. And he is eager to return to the show in September for regular season football. So let's just start off with the playoff loss. I know everyone that watched it or is listening to the show knows how dreadful that was. Just for a small recap, I know no one wants it, but Dak threw two interceptions and Dallas gave up 143 rushing yards. So on top of that, 272, passing yards and 7.7 yards per play. So just it was an abysmal game all around, and I sat there in shock as Jordan Love diced up the defense that I think a lot of Cowboys fans knew was susceptible to get thrown at and ran through when you were going up against a competent offensive play caller and a good quarterback. I think a lot of maybe some Cowboys fans, but a lot of the media or just fan bases elsewhere were like, "Oh my goodness, their defense is so great," because the Giants game went both Giants games and just other games, just the amount of picks we had. Deron Bland, setting a record for the most pick sixes in a season. But when you look at the Seattle Seahawks game, if it weren't for Dak, Jake Ferguson, and the offense, Dallas loses that game. The defense did little to nothing to allow the offense to stay in the game. And even when you look at the Miami game, if Hunter, the fullback, does not fumble the ball, maybe they score there. Tony Pollard had some issues getting into the end zone, but Dak had a great ball at the end or towards the end of the game to go up, and all you need is one stop from the defense for the game to end, and they were unable to do so. And also, if the Lions, if their head coach would have just taken the PAT instead of going for two and trying to win the game or steal the game from Dallas, then who knows what would have happened in overtime. But the overall about the season, we knew that the offense was super good, but the defense was opportunistic. And if they were playing in an average to above average team, then there was no way that they were going to be able to get the stops necessary for the offense to be able, maybe get a 3-and-out every now and then. Like Dallas offense had to be perfect basically, and if they weren't, then they lost. But yeah, I think that the postseason game, a lot of people expected Dallas to win because of how young they were. Jordan Love being in the playoffs for the first year, and it was one of the most embarrassing losses of the franchise. I've only been, really, really watching Dallas for the last 10 years. So some of the biggest losses that I remember: 2016 loss to the Packers, 2014 loss to the Packers, and just those are the playoff losses that really stood out to me the most. On top of this one, but we knew that something was going to change when you're going into the season. Both Dak, Lamb, and the coaches are basically on the last year of their deal. You bring in Mike Zimmer, who was a defensive coordinator in the early 2000s, who was on a 1-year deal. So everyone's basically coaching for the job, which either is going to, make you work that much harder, or just kind of take a year off to be able to go into free agency and be healthy. So now let's kind of go over some of the free agents that Dallas lost. So they lost Dorrance Armstrong to the Commanders, Tyler Biadasz to the Commanders, Dante Fowler to the Commanders, Neville Gallimore to the Miami Dolphins, Jonathan Hankins to the Seattle Seahawks, Noah Iganiba. I'm not even going to try to butcher that last name. The corner that they traded Kelvin Joseph away, he signed with Washington. Tony Pollard signed with Tennessee, and the biggest one of all, Tyron Smith signed with the Jets. So you lost several starters and several key depth pieces, and us as fans were extremely confused by this because throughout the offseason, once Jerry kind of came out to the media, he was like all in, and us fans, oh my goodness, like they're gonna make a move, like moves are gonna be made and things are gonna be different now. And after all, everyone left, and Tyron Smith didn't stay because because Dallas didn't want to give him the money that he wanted and deserved. And now he's a Jet, and then it'd be their left tackle for Aaron Rodgers, and hopefully they have success in the regular season and make the playoffs. But we knew that, left tackle is a question mark now. Does you move Tyler Smith there, or does he stay at left guard where he's an all-pro? What are you going to do at center? I know that we have Brock Hoffman, but what is he going to be able to make a move, or are we going to have to draft Barton, the center out of Duke, and your defensive linemen basically outside of Micah Parsons and Demarcus Lawrence and Sam Williams didn't really have many pieces, and now Mozzie Smith, who had a very underwhelming rookie season, is now the starting defensive tackle. Leighton Vander Esch retired, so now you had safeties playing linebacker last year. Who's going to play linebacker this year? How is Trevon Diggs going to be able to return? Is he going to be healthy? And you also lost Curse, who was a starting safety last year. But things kind of changed during the draft, and we're going to go over just some of the draft picks. So Dallas picked in the back end of the first round, and I thought that they were going to take Barton. Like I said earlier, the center from Duke, just solidify the center position and figure out the left side of the offensive line late in the later rounds. But reports are coming out that they really liked Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma, and Dallas thought that they could trade back, get another pick, because they didn't have a fourth round pick because they traded the fourth round pick for Trey Lance. So that kind of Dallas does really well in rounds 3 through 7. So not having one of those draft picks really hurt them. So they traded back with the Detroit Lions and fleeced them, in my opinion. They got a first round pick and a top with a third just to move back a few slots. So they took Tyler Guyton, Marshawn Nealand, who is a predominant run stuffing defensive end with pass rush upside, and hopefully, as his rookie year, we'll see some pass rush, hopefully some sacks, and more like sophomore or second, third year kind of under Micah Parsons' wing and Demarcus Lawrence's be able to have more success in the pass rush department. And with that first third round pick, got Cooper Beebe, who is one of the best, if not the best, guard out of the draft, and that was probably the best, or the pick that got the most hype from the fan base. And with their second, third round pick, I think that we all thought running back, like you don't have Tony Pollard anymore. Rico Dowdle, Malik Davis, Zeke maybe on a return. Like, what are you going to do at running back? And instead, they took Maris Liufau, a linebacker out of Notre Dame, extremely high IQ player. He threw a lot of tackles, really good in coverage. So, and also who they signed, I meant to mention earlier, but they signed Eric Hendricks, who's been in Mike Zimmer's system for years. So Eric Hendricks and Maris Liufau, kind of pair them together, and you're going to have, and hopefully with Eric Hendricks watching over guys like Overshown, who's also coming off an injury, and Damone Clark and others, just having a more cohesive linebacker unit. And honestly, anything is better than last year, where you had extremely undersized safeties playing the position. After that, you took Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest, who is deemed the steal of the draft, of Dallas's steal of the draft. And then you got Ryan Flournoy, a wide receiver who is either going to maybe be the last wide receiver on the depth chart or make the 53, or going to be hopefully a practice squad stash, and he'll be playing next year, kind of like what they did with Jalen Tolbert. And then you've got Nathan Thomas, another offensive tackle, just a developmental guy, see what he can give you, maybe potential swing tackle in his second or third year. And they got Justin Rogers, a defensive tackle, and a one tech, and he, along with Mozzie and Carl Davis, are all going to be fighting for that first spot. And also, like I mentioned earlier, Mike Zimmer, all these guys that left, like the defensive ends, were not great against the run. And Dan Quinn, for as great as he was, he had a lot of holes, and players came out after the postseason loss and were like, we played a very different game in the postseason than we did weeks 1 through 17. And us as fans were like, why would you have done that? And then it came out a few weeks later that he was taking the job with the Commanders. So fans kind of speculated that he just like threw the towel and was like, I'm a head coach, so it doesn't really matter. But with Mike Zimmer, a much better defensive coordinator against offenses like Mike Shanahan and Sean McVay, who Dallas has historically struggled against in the Dan Quinn defensive era. So moving on from the draft and just, building up the hype, training camp hits, and you're able to see guys like Tyler Guyton, and how is he going to play in the left tackle role? Is Chuma going to play left tackle, or is Tyler going to take the position? What's going to happen at center? Is it Brock Hoffman, or is Cooper Beebe, who didn't play center much in college, is going to have to work on snapping the ball? What are these linebacking core going to look like? What is Diggs going to look like? What is Overshown going to look like? What is John Stevens, the tight end, going to look like, who would have made this team last year if he didn't tear his ACL? What is this wide receiving core going to look like outside Brandon Cooks and CeeDee Lamb? And also in training camp, CeeDee Lamb wants a new contract, and so does Dak. And Mike is going to want one next year. So CeeDee Lamb not being here over the last few weeks, even though it's been sad, because you want him out there because of how great he is and had an all pro year last year, and you want him and Dak to be able to get some live reps in all these different scrimmages against the Rams. It might have been a blessing in disguise, because you've been able to see guys like Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Cropper, Ryan Flournoy, all these guys that would not have been able to get as many targets are now being able to play. Now Brandon Cooks is the wide receiver 1, and Tolbert's the 2, and now we're fighting for who's going to be the 3rd, 4th, 5th guy, instead of in a position where, if, like I said earlier, just Lamb getting a majority of the targets. So even though he hasn't been here, it's kind of been a blessing in disguise, and hopefully sooner rather than later he gets signed. And then also in training camp, you're already light at defensive end. And then Sam Williams sadly tears his ACL, and hopefully it's a smooth process, and he's able to come back next year better than ever, because this year he was going to be a starter and play a lot of reps. So hopefully next year he'll be able to step into the role and have success. So now with Sam Williams down, Marshawn Nealon's going to have to play a lot more than he was originally planning on, which is going to be great. You're going to be able to see what you have out of him, and he's going to be able to, get better or quicker, which is great for the team. And throughout training camp, again, there have been, it's a lot better than it was last year, or the last training camp, where Dak was throwing interceptions coming off of a 15-pick season, and him throwing a lot of interceptions in camp, and everybody was like, oh, like, is he done? Fans were like skeptical, like, what's going on with Dak? Now, he's having even the last camp was great. He's having a much better camp this year, interception wise, and camp interceptions don't mean anything, but just from a fan standpoint, and not having to, whenever you turn on the sports network, having to see, is Dak Prescott regressing? It's been a much better, mental wise for Cowboy fans. And last week's camp, everyone kind of trying to figure out what these new safeties are going to do, because Marquise Bell was a linebacker last year, now playing a safety. Yahweh Thomas, how is he going to play? Because he's going to have a much bigger role this year. Again, like what's happened is offensive line, tight ends outside of Jake Ferguson. Do you keep guys like Schoonmaker, or do you get rid of, or do you cut them? Just a lot of question marks on this whole roster that Camp's going to be able to kind of figure out. And most recently, the first preseason game took place this past Sunday, and Trey Lance, who you traded a 4th-round pick for, which is a valuable valuable draft pick. You want to see how he's going to be able to play, because he hasn't had that many reps, from high school to now. He didn't play all that much at North Dakota State. He was the quarterback during the COVID years, rarely played much for the 49ers. He had some injuries, missed the year. So he's a very raw guy, a very raw quarterback, and this is the first time that Dallas has really been able to see what he has to offer. And outside of that, you're going to want to see what the new defense is going to be like. Obviously, Zimmer's not going to show everything, but you're going to want to see, what it is in comparison to the Dan Quinn defense. And, Trey Lance wasn't great. He threw the ball 41 times, which I found out today was the most throws that he's had in a game since before high school. So, he only kicked on 25 of those balls, 188 yards, 6 carries of 44 yards. So the most, decent drive he had was in the 4th quarter, where he was throwing the ball and everything was great. The ball was accurate, and then he threw it to McMath, I believe his name is, and he had 2 drops, and that was, a drive killer for the team, and didn't really know what to do from there, because, you're down, or you have a chance to, put a touchdown on the board, and Dallas not been able to score 7 throughout the game. So, just seeing what Trey can do throwing the ball was super important during this game. And even earlier in the game, when they were on the goal line, it was a third or 4th and goal. And instead of running the ball or having like a read option, be able to get 7, McCarthy decided to throw, or tried to call a fade route where wide receiver, kind of like corner route. I'm not like a route guru, but that's what it looked like to me. And the wide receiver was as open as NFL open will get, and he completely missed him. And Trey Lance was either on the money but too high, or far too deep. And on deep balls, or on touchdown, or on like red zone throws, like you want the ball to be in a position where they can catch it. And if it's far too out of reach, then there's a recipe for disaster there. And Trey Lance in training camp, for reporters have said, has not been great in the red zone. So that was one of Mike McCarthy's, try to see what he can give you in the postseason. Try to see what he can give you in the red zone, and see if they've been able to stack these practices, and see if he's been able to have more success than he was able to have in camp. But he was not. Now moving on to the defense, Stetson Bennett. How the defense did against the Rams offense. Stetson Bennett completed 24 passes. He threw 38 for 224 yards, a game-winning touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And I'm going to pull up the rushing yards right now because I forgot to write it down. They ran the ball for 101 rushing yards, which, just starting defensive line isn't out there, but overall, that's pretty good. Hopefully it translates to the Browns game. But things didn't look as bad. The only kind of like big chunk plays that I saw was in the first quarter, the throw to Jordan Whittingworth, the UT wide receiver, he threw a slant route to an Eric Scott. Didn't really give a greatest attempt to trying to tackle him, and he was able to get a bunch of yards after contact, and Damone Clark was able to save a touchdown, and they ended up having to go for 3. So the defense did a phenomenal job of trying to win you the game. Mozzie Smith had a really good game. He was a lot more active than he was last year. But the thing is, Mozzie, is that he, for whatever reason, lost a lot of his Michigan weight last year, and playing a nose tackle, on a significant, like a reduced weight, is difficult because you're going to be thrown around, and he was thrown around last year whenever he was out there. And he had off-season shoulder surgery, so he wasn't really able to work on his craft. It was more of rehabbing. So he's trying to rehab on top of gaining the weight, because Mike Zimmer has always had really good defensive tackles, Linval Joseph to name one of them. So Mozzie's gonna have to gain some weight. So it's been difficult to gain weight and not be able to work out and work on his craft. So he, reports were coming out that his conditioning wasn't great. So he's not really going to be able to give you a game's worth of 100%. Hopefully, as training camp goes on and preseason goes on, we'll be able to get more good drives out of him instead of just, a few plays and then he's done for the game. He looked good. Marshawn Leland was very active. And the most active player on defense, in my opinion, was Marquise Bell. He was all over the place. 6 tackles, 1 interception, and almost had 2, but he dropped it in the end zone. And he almost had a third, but the ball fell right in front of him. So Marquise Bell transitioning back to safety when he played linebacker last year, and he's going to be a great safety on this team, and he's going to know the run defense a lot better because he's playing linebacker. Even though he's undersized, he's going to be able to have a better vision for the holes and where he needs to be able to stop the ball carrier or stop wide receiver. Now, Eric Scott was thrown out a lot, and he had one interception which kind of saved the day, or saved his day, but he was thrown out a lot, and he was getting picked on a good amount. Kalen Carson was picked on a bit, but the coverage was close enough that there was no room for the wide receiver to run after the catch. So that's good. Kalen Carson overall, other people thought that he had a much better day than I did. There were just a few things in the beginning, but things to improve on. He'll be a boundary starter this year if he needs to, but definitely next year and the year after. So he's going to have a very promising career. And, you were able to see Guyton. Guyton played a lot more this game than they needed to because Chuma Edoga dislocated a big toe. So Guyton had to come back in the second half, and we were all kind of surprised that he was out there. Cooper Beebe played really well. The only play that he wasn't great was in the fourth quarter. One of the sacks on Trey Lance, and he was running around, and Cooper Beebe was on the heels of his feet. And that even the tackle was just full arming him and pushing him out of the way. So that was only lackluster play, but definitely more powerful than Tyler Biadasz was or is, and hopefully can do enough in training camp to be able to secure the starting spot, because Brock Hoffman has not won this starting position. He was a backup last year. He hasn't done anything to wow people. He is more of a veteran. He is a veteran, so he'll get that nod. But if Cooper Beebe keeps on playing well and in practice and preseason and scrimmages, hopefully he gets the nod against Cleveland. And reports were coming out today that based off of his play in the preseason game, that Beebe and Guyton is going to be starting week 1 now because of Edoga's injury, but Beebe got starting center reps today during their walkthrough, which was pretty great. This is what a lot of fans have been wanting. A lot of fans weren't too pleased with the fact that Brock Hoffman and Udoga were starting in the beginning of camp, but hopefully by the end of camp things will be a lot better in for the fans, because run D and the defensive line and offensive line has been the two biggest question marks for Dallas for the last few years. Whether it's musical chairs, offensive line with Martin being healthy for most of it for several years, always been healthy, or it's been great that he's been there. He'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Right tackle Steele has a really bad first year, great second year, and then he tears his ACL. So 2 years ago he didn't play the back end of the season, and last year it was super shaky. You have your left guard and Tyler Smith. Then he has to move to left tackle and back to left guard. Tyron Smith in and out of the lineup. So hopefully this year we'll be able to have more continuity throughout the offensive line, and also offensive line of Guyton, Smith, Beebe, Martin, and Steele needs to get every single rep here that they can, because you don't want, for example, Brock Hoffman or anyone playing, any of the backups playing in the beginning of the season, and then them being like, hey Guyton, hey Beebe, we want you to play, and then them not knowing what the linemen next to them are doing, and the linemen next to them not knowing what Guyton or Beebe are going to do. So the more that they're able to practice together now, the better that it is going to be able to have, and the offensive line will be able to work as one, instead of just 80% of them playing well like we've had in the past. But yeah, that's been my biggest takeaways from the last few weeks. I'm looking forward to this season. With the whole contract negotiation stuff, Dak's leaving it to his agent. Lamb is not gonna. He'll play this. So he'll play the regular season. But the longer that this contract negotiation goes on, the less likely I think that he'll want to play in Dallas, because if they don't get a contract locked down and he has another All Pro year next year, it's going to be, and he hits the open market, it's going to be a lot harder for Dallas to want to give him $35 million a year, like maybe like $36-37 million a year. That's what he's going to want and deserve. And if you don't sign Lamb, you don't sign Dak, and if you don't sign Dak, you don't sign Lamb. And then with Micah Parsons needing a contract next year, so there's a lot of things that the Joneses and their cap people need to do. Steven and Jerry are the kind of only ones that have really let the cap, dictate what they do. Other teams use the cap to their advantage, but Dallas kind of just thinks that the cap is just like big bad wolf that they don't want to really manipulate. So hopefully things change. I'll always be a Cowboys fan, but most of my games, like my Cowboys memories have been in the 2016 to now era of Dak, Zeke, and I think would be a very silly idea to move on from an All-Pro wide receiver, because when you moved on from Amari Cooper, no one really understood that. You only got him for a 5th-round pick, so that no one really understood that. So now if you get rid of Lamb, and then Dak's not going to want to stay, and then Trey Lance didn't really show you much. They were rookies who showed you more than Trey Lance has shown you on preseason week 1. So there's not much hope there. Trey Lance is on a last year of his deal, so is Cooper Rush. And outside of Romo and Dak, who, Romo undrafted free agent, Dak a 4th-round pick that had some off the field, and had an off the field incident, so he kind of fell in the draft. And great at Mississippi State, though. Dallas hasn't really been able to, evaluate quarterbacks well. They wanted, I can't even remember their names, but in the 2016 draft, they were the quarterback the Raiders drafted. They wanted a quarterback that the Broncos drafted. So they wanted basically every quarterback that was not named that was not named Dak. And, even in 2014, they wanted Johnny Manziel, thankfully, or sorry, earlier than that, they wanted Johnny Manziel. Thankfully, they took um, Zach Martin, but they just have not shown that they've been able to evaluate college quarterbacks all that well. And I think that it's, the unknown, who knows, with a rebuild, the team's super young, and walking away from three of your best players, I don't think is all that smart. But I think they'll get them done. And once that happens, fans can kind of, I know that my hope will be restored. I thought that there were reports that Dak and some other coaches weren't at practice last Thursday or Friday. Like, oh my goodness, is Dak going to get signed? And I felt excited about the team for the first time in several months. So hopefully, once these contract negotiations continue and they sign their names, we'll have a lot more hope for the season. But yeah, well, we're going to find out a lot more throughout the next few weeks with what's going to happen with camp, who's going to start, who they're going to cut. There's always a few guys that fans fall in love with that don't make the team. So we're going to find out who those are in the coming weeks, on top of the guys that are already performing really well. And hopefully, yeah, people are speculating that Lamb's going to sign the deal within the next week to 10 days. Hopefully that happens. And then Dak, I would assume his deal would or be released soon thereafter. But yeah, moving forward, I'm going to be posting a video for every preseason game, a day or two, maybe 3 after the fact, just to get, watch the game and take my thoughts, and then put out a video. And then for the regular season, when Ray comes back, the plan is to do like a pre-game and like a pre-game show and then a post-game show. And hopefully both of our schedules align, but if for whatever reason we can't, and I'm free, then I'll definitely be putting out the pre-game shows and the post-game shows. Those are always super fun to do. But yeah, another off season in the books. Thank you for listening. I know that it's been a while, so thank you for the loyal fans for not forgetting about us. And we're gonna be back and better than ever. Just looking forward, to the guests that we're gonna have in the future. I plan on doing the panel that we always do for like we did last year for the beginning of the season this year. So gonna get that in the works over the next few weeks. But yeah, super excited to be back. It's this mic's been on my bookcase for the last few months, and I've definitely missed being able to talk about the Cowboys instead of just talking about it in group chats with Ray and other people. So it's definitely been good to have an outlet and be able to talk again and be free. But thank you, Cowboys Nation. It's gonna be a great year, ups and downs for sure, but hopefully we can have some success in the postseason and win a Super Bowl. That's what this is all about. But my name is Owen. This is All About America's Team, brought to you by Delahanty Media. And see you next week. Go Cowboys.